Cheers, everybody. It's Sleepy Vlog 72.2 coming at you. Bunch of random stuff. I was very upset. I'm smiling, but I was very upset to see on Twitter today that Oddfellowsthoughts has been, I forget what the proper term is, but locked down by YouTube and not allowed to put up live streaming videos because of offensive material, I guess was the claim. And so he has to make some kind of petition to get out, undo that. Otherwise, it'll be 90 days or something like that before he can do a live show. And he has been, in my opinion, one of the bedrocks of the community because of his over 4 years, seems like maybe 4.5 years, I don't know, of hosting almost every single week, very consistently, this live show, the Comic Book Roundtable, which I'm not sure who it started with. I know that Constant Bromstar did it and Captain Cummings did it, and each person in turn got too busy or had other things on their plate. So Travis took it over initially, maybe temporarily, and it just became his thing, and he shaped it to be his, to be very focused on just talking about the new comics of that week and the news of the week, if there's any news. And he has always made it open to anybody who wants to come on. And so that's been there, it feels like forever. And I always listen to it it's usually quite long. I often listen to it while I'm doing my more drudgery work on Mondays and Tuesdays as I sit before my computer screen at work. Which, just as a side, a constant complaint, my computer at work is so much weaker than my computer at home. It's even weaker than my new iPhone. I suppose my new iPhone might be more powerful than this computer I'm talking to you on right now. But anyway, I just like to get that off my chest every once in a while. I think my computer is still a Core 2 Duo at work. Anyway, we don't know, or I don't know. Last I knew, no one knew if it was just some random YouTube thing, or if someone who doesn't like Travis or doesn't like someone else who appears regularly on his shows decided to just try to screw the works up. But if that's the case, it's really low, because it's just been a show maybe that used to be kind of a central show to the community. As the community got bigger and there's lots of live shows, it's probably just a little niche, but it's a happy little niche. It's a fun little niche. So I was really sad to hear about that. I'm just going to look at my current history, let you know some of the people I've been watching on YouTube recently. Ghostcritic, the last person I watched on YouTube just a few minutes ago. And then AcomicBookLook with an excellent review of Squirrel Girl. I've watched some Miz Moffatt, who's kind of a charming booktuber who likes comics too and works at a comic book store. So she's a great person to check out. The bagging and boarding bad boy, Mark, who's been on here in several different iterations on YouTube for a long time and is always a great spirit, a great one of the kings of the nerds in my mind. Speaking of a king of the nerds, Edward2962, he's a beer drinking man's man, but he also loves comics. And I understand, before he was on YouTube long before I was, and before that he was an active reviewer on various websites and long known on lots of comic book chat, what do you call them? Not bulletin boards, but you know what I mean. Anyway, Edward, I never remember his numbers, but now I have them right in front of me. Edward2962, one of my favorites, who maybe gets bypassed by a lot of people on YouTube. I've watched an Oddfellowsthoughts, What the Fugue recently, some drSilverAge, going on his quest for go-go checks, DC Comics. I that was another funny thing in that book that I still keep coming back to, the slugfest between Marvel and DC. They listed the go-go checks, which drSilverAge loves and I think are very cool, as one of the worst decisions DC ever made in their attempt to seem hip and stuff. And now it does seem kind of retro cool to us, but maybe when you were, if you were a college student at the time, you'd think, God, there's such pitiful old men trying to be hip. I don't know. I don't know if Slugfest's right about that. But an interesting thing is a lot of things that can seem uncool or the brilliance of them can go unnoticed at the time, get appreciated by those of us who grow up with them and look back on them. And I feel that's more important than what people at the time thought now. Like, we have the perspective. I was thinking of that when I was going through this phase of watching lots of videos about Jack Kirby and all these tributes to him and stuff, and there was one that was a panel of Roy Thomas brought on as a Jack Kirby expert because he worked at Marvel during the Silver Age of Marvel. But he kind of retained the party line that after Kirby left Marvel, he never was as good again. And you can completely understand how they see it that way, but with time we can see all kinds of golden nuggets throughout Kirby's work. But I think he couldn't get out of that, how they felt at the time. And if you look, like he specifically, I think, said the stuff when Kirby came back to Marvel that there was nothing there of particular value. And if you look back on it now, there's lots of stuff of value. And if you, and certainly the New Gods and Commandy, which he was kind of giving short shrift to also, because Kirby couldn't write well. But if you look back on the stuff that everyone else was doing at Marvel during the same time Kirby was there, I will be coming back to this Kirby obsession again. But all these people who are making fun of Kirby at the time and saying, oh, he's over the hill and stuff, most of those people, their work is not as well remembered as even this lesser Kirby of that Marvel period of Devil Dinosaur and Machine Man and 2001 and his Captain America bicentennial era and all of that. So my whole point, going to the go-go check stuff, and perspective is everything. And we can see, and especially when we watch drSilverAge videos, that the go-go check era is a lot of fun and kind of cool that they did that. Let's see, who else have I watched recently? Seeing all these Lego videos of my daughters that are on here. Rob Harrison, Don the Comic Book Junkie, Dr. Strangelife, more Dr. Strangelife. I guess I watched the most recent Dr. Strangelife and then I went back and caught an older one of his that I probably had seen before. The comic book Aesthete. I love the comic book Aesthete, and he did an unusual video where he showed his face about the community tag, and I really appreciated what he did there. ETA Nick, or ETA Nick 1. I watch a lot of ETA Nick 1. dynamitecrip. I've watched a couple more Comic Pro Secrets, the Ethan Van Scriver channel. Cerebus Online, where you get to see every week a video from the legendary Dave Sim. GENEPAULACEPETER had a video recently, the Frog Queen. I love the Frog Queen. Finally watched her advanced comic book review of Kid Lobotomy. I didn't watch it in advance because I wanted to read Kid Lobotomy first. I think she liked Kid Lobotomy more than I did. But I'm sticking with Kid Lobotomy. I'll read some more issues. Who else? I'm not Kingdom Comics. I've watched a bunch of his 1 year reflections. So yeah, now I'm just seeing a ton of Lego videos. My daughter, if you have kids who like Legos, watch LEV and Brick Motion. Those are the two my daughter's obsessed by. So I just did a video about books I have out of the library, and I have even more that I forgot to mention. And just because I think they're interesting, I wanted to throw them out there. This one, Super Weird Heroes. I think I was really tempted to buy this, when I just saw the cover and saw that it existed. But I'm glad I got it out of the library. It's fun to look at. It's fun to know about all these heroes. I don't think a Bullet Man is super weird, but there's plenty of ones that really are super weird in here. Captain Truth. And maybe someday I'd want to own this just for the novelty of it, but I can't read any of these comic books all the way through. All these little comic book stories. They're like 7 or 8 pages, and each one I read for a few pages, and then I kind of give up. Funny Man. I'm probably not going to find the one that I thought was particularly clever. I do like the title of this comic book is Regular Fellers Heroic Comics. Oh, here's a good one. This is a guy who goes around and has adventures with his superpowered kangaroo. I don't think he has superpowers. I think just his kangaroo does, or maybe they both do. Kangaroo Man with Bingo, the amazing kangaroo. Done right. They should bring that back. Someone should bring that back. Look at that kangaroo go. Oh yeah. Kismet, Man of Fate. Oh yeah, shooting the Nazis. So there's that. And then there's this thing which I think is really cool, got out of the library. I might buy this. So this is the complete Marvel Cosmos from Hidden Universe Travel Guides. I don't know if there's a whole series of travel guides of imaginary places. So this is a travel guide of the more cosmic Marvel universe. It just has one problem with it, which I guess is the way they're marketing it. It's supposed to be a tie-in with the Guardians of the Galaxy, and throughout it has little notes, handwritten notes in the just in the margins and all over the book by the characters from Guardians of the Galaxy, as if they've read this book and left their own comments in it. So it's like you have their copy of the guide. But like if you're on a tight budget, not so much. Star-Lord. I want a straight guide to the galaxy, and I think this one emphasizes places, gives greater emphasis to places that the Guardians might go to. But I mean, you've got on Earth, Wakanda, you've got a bunch of Asgard stuff and other Norse places. It's a nicely designed book too. So anyway, it's again something fun to get or look through at the library. I probably will someday get this if it's available, or maybe I can find a used copy. So this summer, an old friend got in touch with me. Someone I knew pretty well in college and in the 80s after college. For her entire after college life has been spent in New York City, and I don't really like New York City. I lived there for a little while after college, and I don't really like it. And however these things happen, mostly me. I'm a bad friend. I lost touch with her, but we had a few interactions online, and then suddenly she said she's coming to town, and she's going to be here for 5 days or something like that. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll see how this goes. We'll see how much time we can spend together. But when we got together, it was delightful, and she has a husband who she married some, 15 or 18 years ago. And in the days when I used to see her a lot, she had a different fiance who I liked a lot. And I was partially ready to not like the new husband in defense of the old fiance, but I really liked her husband a lot too. So I did quite a bit of touring around Portland with them. And they had this guidebook telling them about must-see places in Portland, some of which were like the carts down the street from my house or the nearest cemetery in my neighborhood. The cemetery proved kind of interesting, but just funny now that Portland is so popular to have it have guidebooks about it. The guidebooks should really say the traffic sucks and the homeless people have kind of taken over the city. But anyway, everybody wants to go to Voodoo Donuts and Salt and Straw ice cream and all of that. So one of the things in their guidebook was a comic book museum or comic book art gallery. And I'd never heard of this. What comic book art gallery? I don't know. But strangely, it was only open 3 days a month. And one of the days was while they were there and they wanted to go. And so we hunted this place down. We had to like wade through homeless people in this part of town. Had an actual kind of scary moment. And we went in, and it was this tiny little room, and it had drawings by children pinned up on the wall with tacks, with thumbtacks. There we go, I got an example in case anyone doesn't know what a thumbtack is. They were pinned up on the wall, one thumbtack on each one, not even the kind where you do it on all four corners to keep the thing steady. And it was kind of a loft, so we were on the first floor and there were stairs going up, and there was interesting looking art going up the stairs, but this guy came down the stairs and just kind of sat at the bottom of the stairs, maybe making sure we wouldn't go up them. And he said he was the curator of this and that this was some comics in the schools exhibit. And there must have been 5 or 6 drawings. And when we talked to him more, it turned out that these were artist lofts, but part of the deal to get the cheap rent of the artist lofts in this expensive part of downtown, ironic it's an expensive part of downtown full of homeless people, but in this expensive part of downtown was that you had to do a gallery, you have to maintain a gallery and you have to have a minimum number of open hours each month. So he was clearly doing the minimum amount, and he was calling it a comic art gallery. Maybe other months he really was showing some comic art, I don't know, but very weird experience. And I asked him, was he doing a lot of art? And he said, no, I'm mostly curating this gallery. It's like, what? You're open 3 days a week and 3 days a month, and you're pinning up with one pin drawings. So I don't know what that's about. So maybe he was not an artist at all. Although my friend's husband knew a local indie comic book artist who I'd never heard of. In fact, I have to ask him the name of that person again so I can look for their books and learn more about local indie comic book artists. But and this guy running the gallery knew him too, so he did seem somewhat connected to the alternative comic scene and everything. So while we were there, we were very close to Floating World, the really unusual comic book store that publishes its own comics and has a lot of zines and a lot of the more art books and stuff. And I don't usually go to it because it's in downtown Portland where parking is murder, and I just don't like downtown Portland anymore. I used to work in downtown Portland and spend every afternoon wandering around, going to shops and hanging out at Powell's bookstore, but it's kind of a turn-off to me now. But anyway, Floating World is really cool, and so I said, well, while we're here, let's go to Floating World. And I took them over to Floating World, and it was the husband's birthday. And I liked him so much, and he was really into movies, but he said he wanted to know more about comics and stuff. So I bought him the hardback of The Fade Out, and I also bought him the first volume of Criminal for his birthday at Floating World. And I bought a few other things. I bought a trade of Revenger, which I read and then I sent on to Res Reads. And I bought this Capra Round 4. which I haven't gotten to read yet. So I have all 4 rounds of Capra now, and I have a lot of the single issues too. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but it's a really nice. Capra is like fanfic or whatever you call it, fanzine stuff, but at a super high level, a really unique art style, and a lot of really cool stuff going on. And I guess he's kind of making a living from doing it. I'm not sure, but I think I've mentioned it before. It's but for those who don't know about it, it's his own retake on the classic Suicide Squad, the John Ostrander version, but evolving a lot and taking in a lot of other sort of Silver and Bronze Age comic book tropes and playing with them. Yeah, so side issue. And they had these odd little things, this 4-page Mobius story. It's just, I guess it's called Vroom, Mobius Vroom, and it was $3.50 for this. Mom's Apple Pie. It's kind of an underground comic-ish feeling little 4-page story. Yeah. I actually bought 2 copies because it came in different colors, and I mistook. I don't have the other copy, but I mistook them for 2 different Mobius mini comics, and they have lots of these Mobius trading cards, which I guess must still be in print because now I've seen them in England also when I visited shops with La Raza. But the really cool thing is 3 weeks later, when it was my birthday, I received in the mail Ditko Unleashed from my friend and her husband. They remembered me sort of drooling over this book at Floating World, and so they bought it for me. And the interesting, fascinating thing about Ditko Unleashed and American Hero, kind of gives me a kick that they call Ditko an American hero. I don't know how many people in America have ever heard of him, but we have. We are the inner circle. This is actually a catalog, one of those, when they have an art gallery showing or more of a museum showing, they often print out a catalog showing all the artwork and having some essays in it by art critics or art history people. But this one, it's hardback, it's gigantic, it's reprinted by IDW for the American audience. I think it's $60. Hopefully they got a good discount in buying it for me. But it's not just a little bit of an essay. It's a ginormous long study of Steve Ditko's creative evolutions. And I've only gotten so far into it, but the stuff about his early art style and everything I found fascinating. If you like Ditko and you can afford it or find a good price on it, I think this is a really good thing. And it's really interesting to read about a comic book artist written the way art historians and art critics write about art. It's a completely different thing than the kind of thing you might read in Back Issue or Alter Ego or that kind of thing, or just a general pop book about comics. And if you want to, you can read it in Spanish too. So it shows you the difference in the respect for some of these great artists over in certain European countries than over here in the United States. But yeah, I was super impressed that they picked up on that and that they sent that to me. And finally, for this edition of Sleepy Vlog 72, I wanted to show you and break open, because I haven't looked in it yet. I just bought the other day on eBay Giant Labors of Love, featuring classic AMA strips of the Ditto fanzines. I'm not sure what AMA means. And this is volume 2. and they were asking a lot of money for this on eBay. I've been searching around for old fanzines, and a lot of them are very expensive, so this was actually a cheaper option to hopefully get a look at some of the comic strips people used to do in fanzines. And I offered them some money that still was more money than I really should be paying for this, but a lot less than they were asking for, and they accepted it. The seller accepted it. So now I'm going to try and open it and see what's inside. I do notice it's just a stapled together volume. I haven't as yet been able to find anyone selling number 1. Backing board. This was printed in 1996, I see. So maybe I will read the introductions later, and I may have more to say about it. Dear Comics Fanzine Fanatics, Editors, Annotations, and Table of Contents. Richard Grass Green. I seem to remember Grass Green. Doesn't he also do Underground Comics? Ron Foss, Buddy Sanders. I'm not familiar with those people. Bill Joe White. I remember Bill Joe White. I remember that name. I think that person might also be in science fiction fandom too. So here's Bill Joe's comic strip. It says Ditto, but these are, Ditto would be in blue, wouldn't it? But these are, I guess, reprinted in black and white, so they're more visible, maybe. Dimension Man. So when I talk about having comic strips done by us in the fanzine that I'm thinking of doing, I'm thinking of things like this. Yeah, like look at that. That's, you know, some of us are better artists than others, and it doesn't really matter. Anyone who wants to draw something could be in one of these. Could do a strip. And I'll talk more in some future video about the fanzine idea. When I kind of broached it in that first video about it, I think some people thought that I was worried about distribution, or had a special vision for it, whereas I just want an anthology of whatever anyone wants to do. I have to figure out how large of a fanzine I can afford to publish, and I just want to send it to people who are involved in the YouTube community, and I want to not charge money, so I don't have to worry about that. I'm just gonna print out, as you know, get a rough idea of who wants it, print out as many copies as I can, and send it out to people. There are people who appear in fanzines who eventually become pros. I know Jim Starlin started there, Brent Anderson, who else? Oh, okay, so there's this great podcast with particularly one great episode for us comic book fans, but it's a good and there may be more coming. I think so. There's this guy Scott Edelman. I've mentioned him before. He is a science fiction writer, editor. He was also an editor at Marvel a million years ago. But he goes to science fiction cons, and he goes out to dinner with writers and has dinner with them and records the conversation, and it's called Eating the Fantastic. And there's this incredibly good one where he goes out to dinner with George R.R. Martin of the Game of Thrones fame, but he mostly talks with Martin about other aspects of his career pre-Game of Thrones. And some of you may know that if you look in old Fantastic Four comics and other things, you can see George R.R. Martin's letters in there. And since Martin and Scott Edelman got their start in comic book fandom, they talk a lot about that. And you get to see Martin talking about the fanzines he was in. So he sent in some letters, and back then they published your address, and and once they publish your address, apparently, you'd start getting letters from people who publish fanzines saying, hey, you want a copy of our fanzine? And they'd send them the fanzine. And then he started writing for fanzines, and he did comics and fiction in the fanzines. And that was his beginning as a writer, which ultimately led to the Game of Thrones. So like the first third of this podcast is pretty much all about comics and comics fandom. So I will find that and put a link down below. And the whole thing is really interesting. Both Scott and George R. R. Martin are fun people to listen to talking. And I know that Scott is planning to start interviewing some of his old comic book buddies too. So I think there's a Marv Wolfman one coming up. But so far it's all been science fiction writers. And if you're interested in that, there may be interesting nuggets in there. Some of the people that he talks to are very current, and many of us wouldn't know who they are. But anyway, check out the George R. R. Martin one, because that was a delight. And so many sort of little nuggets about the old fanzine world. And we are in the new fanzine world, the YouTube world. But I, being very retro, and look at this, Son of Satan by Bill Joe White, The Viper. So this is, I don't know, this is the beginning of me finding some of the stuff I wanted to dig up. So with that, I think I've covered everything I want to in this episode. I will be back with more Sleepy Vlogs number 72, which will catch me up on all the things I wanted to do in a Sleepy Vlog for the past 3 or 4 months. I don't know why I think this way, why I'm doing it this way. I also want to do a video about some 1970s Steve Englehart Captain America comics, which I'm trying to do as screenshots off of digital comics, because I thought that might be more visually useful, you know, hear my voiceover and see a big version of the pictures rather than me holding the comics up and flipping them, but I'm not sure yet how I'll do that. I also have in mind I want to do a tribute to Squirrel Girl, and I want to do a closer examination, for me closer anyway, of some of the recent Tom King comics. The weird Commandy comic he had out recently, the recent Batman storylines, the feels like there was something else he'd done recently that I wanted to talk about. I'll think of it. Soon he's going to have another Swamp Thing, or an actual Swamp Thing story out. I'm really looking forward to that, along with the last Len Wein Swamp Thing. So yeah, I'm super psyched to keep doing these videos. We'll see. Every night I think, maybe I'm not going to do it. Maybe I'm just going to take tonight off. I really thought that tonight. And here I am yet again doing an overly long video. So, talk to y'all later.